Welcome to the Global Marketing Show, the podcast for all things international business. I'm your host, Wendy Pease, president of Rapport International and a translation expert. Come along with me today as we talk to an expert in the global marketing world about facing their biggest fears, hearing about mistakes they made or saw, discussing best practices, and sharing fun travel, language, and culture stories. Hello and welcome to the Global Marketing Show podcast. It's brought to you by Rapport International, the high quality translation interpretation company with 100% satisfaction. And you know what else is really high quality? And I was reading on their website that you only need 7 pairs of them to have a lifetime of socks because their quality is so good. And those are Darn Tough socks. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. I see them in the stores with a lot of hikers in them, but there's so much more. Today, we're welcoming Joe Nocito, who is the International Sales and Marketplace Business Development Lead. He's a fascinating guy. So Joe, welcome.
Good morning, Wendy. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. I'm so excited because your story is fascinating. And let's jump into Darn Tough. I went on the website and I immediately get a pop-up that says, enter to win a lifetime of socks. And my sock drawer flashed in front of my eyes. And so, and on it says all you need is 7 socks because that'll get you 1 per day for the rest of your life. I thought, oh my gosh, how easy would that be? Tell me about Darn Tough Socks. How did this company get started, and how are you making socks that are such high quality?
Yeah, as long as you're doing your laundry every few weeks, you'll have a sock for every day of the week. And also our socks are largely merino wool, which is really good at not getting stinky. So you don't have to wash them nearly as much. So Darn Tough got started about...
Wait. I'm laughing and I'm trying to keep quiet to not introduce you. But okay, so you have 7 pairs of socks for 2 feet every day, assuming you have 2 feet. You only have to do laundry every couple of weeks because you can re-wear them because they don't get stinky.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like the dream sock. Okay.
It sure is. No, merino wool is magical.
Yeah.
I'm told sheep have been running around in that material for 10,000 years or more. So.
Okay. The same sheep wearing the same wool, huh? All right. So how did the company get started?
So the company is owned by Rick Cabot and his dad, Mark Cabot. And Mark Cabot started a sock mill in Northfield, Vermont in 1978. And they did private label socks for a lot of U.S. brands, brands that you would know, like Gap, Banana Republic, Old Navy, Brooks Brothers. And they had a growing business. And then towards the late 1990s, early 2000s, all those companies realized that they can get their products cheaper overseas. And so the Cabot family kind of watched their business shrink and dwindle. And so they kind of stood up to that and said, well, if we have our own brand, we can control our own destiny. And so they bet the farm on taking all the know-how of a couple decades of making socks and said, let's make the best quality socks that we can on the market, and let's guarantee them for life. And so in 2004, they did that. They essentially bet the farm on 3,500 pairs of running socks that they gave away at Burlington, Vermont Marathon. And the rest is history. Here, now today, I think in 2004 it was about 35 employees, and today we're just over 400. And now selling into over 25 countries worldwide.
Oh my gosh,
yeah, it's a
that's
great story.
Fantastic. So you're selling into 25 countries. So from 2004, when did you start your international journey?
So I've only been here about 5 years, and I'm about maybe 5 years before that, we have a great story from our Japanese distribution team. They kind of walked into the mill one day and wanted to sell our socks in Japan. And so that was kind of the beginning of it, but there was no business strategy to it. We just accepted some orders and sent socks across to the other side of the world.
How did they find you?
So they dealt with some other US brands, and I think they were introduced by some of our US sales reps that were selling similar footwear, maybe some similar clothing, and were told to come check us out.
Oh, how fascinating. So it was just a lucky introduction, and they
It
go
sure
up
was.
to way northern Vermont and say, this is cool. We need this in Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then, there was some export sales to Canada introduced a few years after that, which makes sense based on our proximity. And so those two teams we still work with today. And then, like I said, about 5 years ago when I started, the plan was to start to really build our brand in the global setting. And so that's when we started putting some strategy to it and focus. And that meant gearing up for trade shows and checking to make sure compliance issues. I mean, the list goes on and on of everything you need to do to check off to start selling internationally. So that was kind of how it started, and today we're thriving.
All right, so let's unpack that. Okay, so they were just in Japan and then in Canada because of proximity.
Right.
And then they say, there's a huge opportunity to go international. So we're gonna hire this guy that has some international experience to come in and put a strategy.
A little bit. I actually was I was actually hired on the US side. But then my boss's boss, kind of through some conversations, learned that I spoke a couple languages. I love to travel. So that was how that kind of, I got asked if I wanted to start to work into that setting and help build the international sales.
So you're working for the company and the bosses realize they've got this hidden talent in you, that you have this international, background that you could help grow the company. How did you go about doing that and developing a strategy? Because I think there's a lot of companies that are in the US that go, yeah, we'd like to do that, but that's a big, scary process. So what were the steps that you took at Darn Tough to do that?
Sure, it's a great question, Wendy. How many hours do we have?
Take it away.
Yeah. I mean, at a high level, there's a whole bunch of due diligence to be done. I mean, granted, we focus our efforts on the outdoor industry, so there are a lot of successful brands that have done this before us, right? And so we do a lot of research into how they did it. Start a lot of conversations. I got introduced to a lot of VPs of sales at a variety of other outdoor companies, talk to their counterparts in Europe. And, I think it's a tight-knit network. And so I would recommend that to anybody.
So what kind of companies, like what companies were you talking to?
So we were talking to like Osprey Packs. They make really great backpacks for the outdoor industry. And obviously being in selling socks, we talked to a lot of footwear brands because it's a complementary product. So we have a lot of friends in that industry that we don't compete with. For sure, we even talk to footwear brands to get footwear for our photo shoots. So it's leveraging your network of friends. And you have to know your competition. You got to see what your competition is doing in all these countries. So that's a start at the high level. And you obviously have to decide on investment on your side, how much you're willing to invest. It's going to take time. It's going to take money. There are some risks. I would also recommend reaching out to your local chambers of commerce, the Department of Commerce, which is a federal division that they have local representatives that can help you out, get you connected and talking to people. They could do a lot of legwork for you up front too to help you out. And I will admit that's something that we don't take enough advantage of.
Yeah, that's good to know. I was just talking to a representative from the Department of Commerce, and they have put together a whole e-commerce support system. So their supports are fantastic.
Absolutely. And it should be noted, there's a lot of grants to go after for that too. And again, I fully admit it's a time and bandwidth thing. And you're chasing leads and new business, and you're growing, hopefully. And so then sometimes it's a lot of paperwork pushing to get some grants, but your state has grants for you too that can be made available and offset translation costs, trade show costs, get you introduced to people at those foreign trade shows. So those are all things that I highly recommend.
Yes, and if anybody's interested, you can go to the Rapport International website, which is rapporttranslations.com, and look for the little search engine on top and search grants, and it'll take you directly to the contacts at the states to find out more about it. Or you can reach out to me, and I can help you. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, because oftentimes the states don't even give the money out because they don't have enough applicants for it.
Yeah, I've recently learned that in Vermont, there's only a handful of businesses truly taking advantage of these services. And granted, Vermont is the second least populous state in the country, but still, there are businesses here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and there's a very active trade representative there too, or trade support. So it's worth doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and being, like we said, the proximity to Canada, I know that there's a lot of Quebec to Vermont trade. And so there's, like you said, there's a lot of trade representatives to help with that. And in this case, with Quebec, you have to look at translations and things like that too, to keep in mind.
Yeah, so tell me more about translation. How did you okay, so you were in two countries. Before we get into that, you were in two countries. 5 years ago, they put you more in that. You start your due diligence and you look at the outdoor industry and complementary products and your friends that you have in the industry. So I think that's a good idea. The second thing you said was to look at your competition. So you don't have to name them here, but when you looked at your competition, what were you looking for? Like, what were some of the questions you were trying to see, and what did you find?
Well, one of the major things, one of our major competitors has been exporting for 10 years more than we have, maybe even longer than that. So they have a pretty strong presence in most of the countries that we're now targeting, and our largest competitor here in the US as well. So, we're looking to see what they're doing right, maybe what they're doing wrong, learn from some of their mistakes. I mean, everybody's going to make some mistakes in this process. There's no, there are guidebooks, I guess, but it's not a one size fits all. So I think you're looking to see where they have success, because it's likely that if you have a similar product, then you can also succeed. And so we walk into key retailers in foreign countries and we tell them we want to be their prominent US brand of specialty socks. And then I have a high regard for the local brands in all the other countries too, because a lot of retailers, they want to keep there's other local competition, and that's fine. That they make a good product, but we want to come in and be the premium US product and tell our story.
Okay, so made in the US is a really big deal.
It resonates for sure.
Okay. Right. So made in the US is not just a thing that's in the US, but around the world, looking for that made in the US premium brand. Yeah. Okay. So that's really interesting. So you looked for the markets they were having success in and figured you could have success. So that was a draw, not picking someplace else that they might not have a presence and try to win that market.
Sure. I mean, it's a little bit of both. I'm also, I have have a different opinion from my boss. I'm, and maybe I'll get in trouble for saying this. It's recorded. It'll be official now. But I feel that every day that we're not in a market, that's an opportunity for a competitor to be there.
Yes.
And whereas I'm encouraged to take one step back and be a little more strategic in how we place ourselves into markets. I feel that we've gotten ourselves into most of the primary market, the primary markets. But there's smaller markets that I'm not allowed to touch yet. And again, I just feel that any day we're not there, it's another competitor's product being sold there instead of our own.
Yes, that's an interesting one, is let's go wide or let's go deep.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a continual question for companies.
Yeah. Narrow and
Yeah.
deep is it keeps a focus. But the other piece to this too is you're chasing well, in our case, we're chasing markets where there's a population that is worthwhile. We're chasing larger outdoor markets too. We're not necessarily going after big urbanized regions. But I think one of the big takeaways too is, Europe has twice the population as the U.S. and that's really concentrated into two countries too. You have Germany, which is the size of California, and the UK, which is about the size of Alabama, I think. And so, those two countries are half of your consumer buying power in Europe. So those are also pivotal pieces to your growth, I think, is to really focus where it's going to matter the most. It's the lower hanging fruit. And that's where my boss would tell me, don't go after the country that has 500,000 people and we'll sell 50 pairs of socks.
Right.
So it's a balance.
So it's looking at the numbers. I had never realized that Europe had twice the population in much smaller. I guess I did, but I never put the numbers around it, because if you look at the train system, they can move,
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
a smaller geography, more people, so they've got much better trains. But in the US, it's harder because you're crossing more distance to get to the people. But I never put the numbers around that.
Yeah, I think Europe's about 750 million last time I kind of looked at those numbers, and it's more densely populated too. And so, for instance, and then when you take it country by country, and even more specifically recently with like in the UK with Brexit, we had to kind of relook at how some of that business was happening there, and tariff implications and things like that, which don't affect us directly, but affect our distributors.
Yes.
But the UK is a great example of 50 million people or so, but in a very small geographic area. So, like, postage takes a couple days to get from north to south, and that's a benefit for the retailer, for the consumer. It makes distribution much easier than, say, even here in the US, going East Coast to West Coast.
Right. Yes, that is a benefit. And and then you're also talking about the UK and Germany, where you have a lot of people that are interested in outdoor activities and hiking, and that makes a difference
Right.
too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we talked about due diligence, on the strategy plan, look at the competition, look at the market you're going into. So you went from 2 markets to 25. Which were the first markets that you picked to enter after Japan and Canada?
So we were looking at a lot of Europe, mainland Europe for sure. And again, comes down to just population density. And you've got some great outdoor markets, the Alps, and great skiing, and just a lot of outdoors and hiking. So, and a lot of great shoe brands come out of Northern Italy for outdoor. So, that we feel that we can follow that trajectory of product sales. And then Scandinavia was Scandinavia has a huge outdoor market, and I mean I feel like their whole culture is focused around being outdoors. I think hygge in general, it really means get outside with your flask of bourbon or aquavit in that case, and in their case, and and just be with nature. So it felt like we align really nicely with that.
Yes, yeah. So go ahead and define what hygge is if nobody's heard of that before.
Well, it's just comfort and coziness, and I guess I'll give a shameless plug here. It means a really cozy pair of socks, and being like I said, one with nature.
One with nature. I've heard it.
Yeah.
You're one with your book in front of the fireplace and your
Right.
cozy socks
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Good friends around you, have good company, have some good food. So
Yes.
personally, it aligns really well with my ethos.
Yes, it sure does. It sure does. Yeah, I learned in our pre-call that you're from New York and you moved up to northern Vermont, New York City, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's big, a very drastic difference. But I fell in love with the Green Mountains of Vermont and the hiking, and I couldn't go back to New York City now.
Wait a minute. And also the biking on your LinkedIn profile, it says you're a psychopath, CYCO, and a bikeaholic.
You got me.
So yes, going from New York to Vermont, you get the hygge.
Yeah. I think after you bike into enough taxis in New York, you try to find a little more solitude on the roads of Vermont.
Yes, yes, yes. That is one of the biking capitals of the US. Okay, so you went mainland Europe and then Scandinavia.
Yeah. And then we expanded through Asia, which Asia has huge appreciation for made in USA products and the quality. And so the distribution teams that we work with there, they, having a product that's guaranteed for life like ours is actually not new to them. They do that with some other great apparel brands. So it just dovetails really nice. And we've got some amazing teams over there as well. So like Taiwan and South Korea.
Okay. And so does that put you up to 25 or was there another area?
Well, so we do a little bit in South America as well. Honestly, it hasn't been a huge focus for us yet. There's a lot to learn about that market. An interesting piece too is just taking in the culture of all these. And when I say that, I mean business expectations are different. Like, here in the US, we want to lawyer up and have contracts, and when you go and put a contract on a potential partner's table in Europe, they look at you like you're crazy. They're happy to have a handshake, and your word is good, but so it's kind of, we have to coach both ways, that we do it for a multitude of reasons. And I instead of calling it a contract, we'll call it an agreement. And I pitch that as a kind of some business expectations. And I also position as that if I get fired for saying something bad on a podcast, and somebody else comes in to take my spot, that at least there's some expectations between the two parties that they can carry going forward. But that's just one example of cultural differences. And like I said, to the South America piece, I don't know a lot about the South American business style. I've sure learned a lot about the various European styles, and they vary country to country, and the Asian business styles too. It's really interesting. That's definitely one of my favorite parts of the job, I think.
So how do you figure that out? Because you've been successful in doing that and figuring out how to do business in all the countries that you're in already. You've had to do that. So now that you're, what have you done that's been successful in figuring that out?
Oh, and figuring that out, some of it's luck, some of it's making a fool out of yourself, and with a group of people. I always come back to this funny you know how you might toast with a cheers, and the a lot of times the dinners after a successful meeting are where you do more business than the conference room. And I think at this one time in Taiwan in particular, I didn't know the rituals of the toast. And you basically, they want to see the foreigner basically drunk and under the table. And their company has like the designated drinker, and I'm gonna butcher it, but they fill your glass, and when somebody looks at you and says "ganbai," you have to bottoms up, and it means dry cup, so you have to drink the whole thing. And when you're not looking, everybody there, and it's I was outnumbered, like 1 to 8, and when you're not looking, they're filling your cup, and it's almost disrespectful not to drink, unless you really state that ahead of time. So, like I said, I embarrassed myself, and that was at lunch. So then we had to go do more work for the rest of the day.
You got smashed at lunch.
I will not confirm or deny.
Were you even able to go back and be productive at lunch in the afternoon?
I was, fortunately. We'll call it years of training, but also, like, I just remember drinking so much water, and so it's trying to just dilute everything inside. And then we had to drive 2 hours south to Taichung, if I remember correctly, and I just remember having to stop every 10 minutes and to pee, and it was but it's such a memorable experience, and and the team, every time I see them, I bonded with the whole team that day, and a lot of sales and business is trust, and building these trusting relationships. So that's like I said, comes to the culture. Learn the culture before you go.
Right. So now that you know that situation, is there anything that you could have done to avoid having the ganbai, and having to overdrink to get them to, trust you?
Maybe wait till dinner time to go for your meeting lunch, your meeting meal.
Okay, so you can go home and sleep, and it's not in the middle of the day. But there's nothing you could do when they're pouring the alcohol for you.
I don't think so. Luckily, it was beer, but I know that they would also do the same with some heavier stuff. So I think I got out easy that day.
Oh, that is so funny. Well, and it's not unusual. There was an earlier podcast that we did with the same experience in Vietnam. Yeah, I think it was Vietnam. And then the other one that was really interesting is if an earlier episode on the podcast was Singing Dog Vanilla. He's done his whole business on a handshake. And he's creating vanilla in Indonesia and then distributing all over the place. He's in Whole Foods, and he's like, no, I don't do contracts.
That's great.
Which is, so interesting. But it is, what I've found is it's an agreement. It helps you talk about things you might not have thought of when you're drafting that up. But
for sure. And like I said, it just kind of, I think, sets a tone. But I think you do have to, in the US, if somebody said, no, I'm not signing a contract, you'd instantly be wary.
Yeah.
But it's a different situation in Europe and Asia. So you just have to be prepared for that.
Right. And so even a word like calling it an agreement rather than a contract can make a huge difference.
For sure.
Okay, so with the strategy, you talked about due diligence, looking at the competition, and then the investment. You said that it takes time and money, and I know that one thing that people don't allow enough is of time to be successful. Can you talk more about that investment and how you looked at it?
Yeah, absolutely.
How it played out?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I think to keep in mind is you're building long-term relationships with this, and there's not a short-term payoff. I mean, sure, some people will have a short-term payoff and instant success, but it does take a lot of work. You have to roll up your sleeves. There's going to be long days. You want to meet the customer where they're at. So I come in for 4 a.m. Zoom calls with Asia all the time, or I'm staying till 11 o'clock at night for Zoom calls, because I want it to be convenient for our customer. And honestly, in nowadays, I mean, I haven't traveled now in almost 2 years, and coming into the office for 4 a.m. Zoom call is way easier than flying 18 hours to Taiwan.
Right.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I miss seeing the team and can't wait to see all of our teams again. But we've done a lot with being on virtual calls. But yeah, I guess to just expand on that, long-term relationships, you want to set appropriate expectations for both sides. If I'm taking my business plan, I need to run it up the ladder here at our company and set expectations that it's going to take a long time, because it might take longer as bringing a new brand into a new market where they've never heard of you. They may not even be able to pronounce your company name properly. That's a tough one. And so it does take a lot of time, as opposed to in the US, we could probably walk into any retailer. If they don't sell us, they probably know who we are. It doesn't take as much convincing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so when you say it's going to take a long time, are you talking months, years? Like, how's that? What have you seen?
I'd planned for years.
Mm-hmm.
It's, in our case, it could take a couple years just to get. We have about 250 different styles that we sell, and it could take a year and a half, 2 years, just to understand what that market wants from our lineup. And we could provide them our best sellers list, but like the socks that we sell in Norway compared to the socks we sell to their neighbor in Sweden are very different. Norway goes after a way more colorful, and Sweden goes after a little bit more muted. And I didn't know that going into it, so we could have steered our distributors the wrong way and had them load up on a bunch of stuff they couldn't sell. So that's where you have to really plan on a slow roll and keep the focus, and just be available to answer questions at all hours.
That is fascinating to me. I wouldn't have guessed that it would be that difference between Norway and Sweden. I would have expected high quality. And then if you told me pick which one would want more colors, I would have guessed Sweden. So that is so interesting. How did you even figure that out? Through the distributors?
Yeah, through distributors, or taking the time. We'd go meet with key accounts, which is definitely one of my, that's what I really enjoy doing, is meeting the buyers and helping the distributors to sell. And so you have to trust that the buyers know what their consumers want, what the people walking into their stores will want. And it's so interesting to, I could one day be showing one part of our catalog, and then the next day be in a different country, and we're focusing on a different part of the catalog. And it's just unexpected to me, for sure.
Right. And with 250, it's not like you're going through and showing them everyone and see. You've got to narrow it down and understand that enough to point them to something that they go, oh yeah, I'm really interested.
For
So
sure.
that's why it takes time, is just you've just got to meet with the people.
Right.
Yeah. And how has that changed doing it virtually? Can you show them, or do they need to touch and feel?
Touch and feel is nice, and we can. Luckily, we're not selling like big heavy engine blocks or anything. We can send over boxes with some socks for them to touch and feel, so that makes it a lot easier. But we've set up a pretty nice Zoom room here that we call it, to put our product on it's well lit, has a light box and a 3D spinner, and the feedback we've gotten is that the was way better and sell in than a lot of our competition, holding a sock up in front of their laptop camera for trying to show the newest designs. So that's another piece. I definitely recommend spending the time to get either good photos of your product, high res, so you can have it, and take the time to build out presentation decks, or set up some cameras and some lighting. I mean, we did it on a shoestring budget, but it works really well.
That is great advice, is you've got to put yourself forward in the best light. And so you were able to figure out something, or how are we going to make them show really well? And it looks really high class. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned, okay, so time, so investment, we went through time. Now, budgeting, and of course this is going to be different for every company depending on what kind of products they have and how it's sending, but how did you go about thinking about investment, like selling to new places in US, the Norwegian market versus the Taiwanese market? Like, how would you even think about budgeting for that?
Yeah. One thing that, again, like I said, it's socks, so it's easy that we can get socks on people's feet, and that's not a tremendous cost in the grand scheme of things. It certainly is less expensive than airfares and hotels and all that. So that's the number one piece, is just get product on people's feet, because we've found that people are pretty loyal to our brand, and we obviously feel that we make a superior product, so we feel that it sells itself in that regard, and our US teams have had success doing the same before we started doing this internationally, so that's helped us for sure. You have to have some faith in your product as well, and confidence.
Well, I think that's for anybody in sales and marketing. You got to have faith and confidence in your product, or you better get another job.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so is the budgeting, like the financial side and the investment of the cost, is it similar to launching like from Vermont to California, or are there additional costs for going international?
There are definitely additional costs. Like I said, the one piece was the legal side of things. Even though people don't necessarily want agreements, we're going to have agreements in place. So I know getting started, we spent a ton with attorneys, making sure that we were protected. And speaking of protection, you want to think about trademark protections in foreign countries to trademark or to protect your intellectual property if you have it. The Madrid Protocol is definitely, if you haven't heard of that, or if your listeners haven't heard of that, look into that.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. What is that?
That protects you, and it's basically gets your trademark registered in, I'm going to say, over 100 countries. So it takes care of most of where you want to at least get yourself covered, your trademarks covered initially.
Oh, that's great to know.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to do more research on that too, because I didn't know about it.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Regulatory compliance, it depends on what you're selling. You have to make sure. I mean, we have very little we have very few issues there. We don't, it comes down to maybe some packaging compliance, depends on what you're looking at country to country. So there's upfront costs in that to make sure that you're compliant, your packaging meets the consumer needs, trademarks are covered. So those costs can add up. And I would say, we did that very gradually as we were kind of warming up the system for this. And then, plan on some consultants where, I still feel we're in our infancy too with this, 5 years in. I'm just really starting to get a grasp of all the foreign tariffs, because our next step is e-commerce expansion. So direct to consumer business in a multitude of countries. And so suddenly we would have tax liability in all these countries. So you've got VAT, GST, HST up in Canada, TVM, MVA, IVA, WTF. There's all these crazy tariffs that we'd have to register for and pay soon. So
Yes,
I'm
I
far
will
from an expert.
introduce you to my contact at the Department of Commerce, who is the e-commerce expert, and they have all sorts of resources and help on that. So after the show, I'll make sure and introduce you. And if anybody listening is in the US and wants help on that, I can, reach out to me, and I'll introduce you to them, because I just learned about the program and it's fantastic. And they work with all the different states on that.
That'd be fantastic. Thanks.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier branding and translation, and I want to get into that because that'll particularly affect you with, if you're going direct to consumer, but I'm sure you've run into it already. Branding, how have you handled the Darn Tough name around the world?
So I guess first off, I just have to, it's a play on words for us. There's darning, which is an old-fashioned repair of knit garments, use socks in particular, and then it's also a testament to the darn tough times that the Cabot family was going through at the beginning. So it's all in there, but yeah, it doesn't translate to a bunch of countries. We joke, with our UK team that we could translate it as quite durable. But we're sticking with, Darn Tough Vermont. We keep Vermont is definitely part of our branding too. So we keep with that. But I've heard all sorts of iterations in Germany. I probably shouldn't say them all, but they're all out there. We've heard a lot of variations, and people don't know necessarily what it means. So that's something to be cognizant of if you're starting a new brand. Look it up. Look up the names, the words you might use. There's a lot of idioms in English that don't translate. There's, I always run our product names, our newest product names past our distributors every season. I like to give the example of, the word mist might invoke like a whimsical lifestyle sock design. But in German, it means manure. So we can't have a shitty sock. So that's just something to keep in mind, and I'm sure you're no stranger to that in the translation world. So these are all the little things you have to keep in mind when you're working to expand globally.
Yeah, I had heard that about mist before, but I've never heard it direct with the product. So shitty sock is hysterical. But yeah, that is something. Now, do you translate or do you keep it in English? Like Darn Tough stays Darn Tough across all the countries?
It stays in English, and because that's the brand name, so we can get away with that. But certain countries like Canada, if we have any online exposure there, it has to be equal prominence French and English to comply in Quebec. So it's just something. So like our product packaging has French and Spanish on it. And then I would tell you, like, I get pressure from our German team. They'd like to see German on there. And it's an interesting thing too. Like in Germany, everything gets translated. A lot of Germans don't necessarily speak a lot of English. They usually speak more English than I speak German, so I'm always appreciative of that.
Right.
But then you go north into Scandinavian countries. They're much smaller countries, and everybody speaks English because. So I've been told, a lot of it is that a country like Norway has 5 million people, Sweden has 10 million. It's not enough to dub movies into their native language. So I was at a bar in Stockholm once, and the waiter sounded American. So I was like, "Oh, are you from the U.S.?" And he just looks at me. He's like, no, man, I love US movies. And I was like, that's fantastic, But then you go to Germany and there's 80 million people and all the movies are dubbed into German. So like I'm in a German hotel and I'm watching The Terminator in German.
German.
So, so that's where, like I said, that's where I think we get pressure from the German side to get German on the packaging. And I think we've got a long way to go in volume before we can really justify that. So so that puts it on our map, it puts it in our future planning of how do we fit a multitude of languages on a very small package.
That's fascinating to me. So you're selling it all the packaging and it is in English.
Right. But
And
English is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and you're waiting so it's the chicken or the egg. You're waiting to get enough of a volume to translate, yet the return on investment by doing a little translation may increase your sales quite a bit.
Exactly. Chicken or the egg. So, we can dabble with doing some relabeling for Germany, which we do, but that adds time and cost to our efforts.
Yeah.
So it's not ideal. So like I said, it's on our roadmap, and so as we become more mature in foreign markets, our export sales right now are depending on the season, like 12 to 16% of our B2B business. And so I think we just really need to get to a little bit higher place before we can justify some additional costs.
Okay. And what's your vision of what percent your international sales will be?
Well, that's a tough question. I'm always astonished when I hear of a company that's 50 or 60% export. I don't have an answer for that. What I always say though is it's really good to have a diversified portfolio. You learn that in business and investing, and it's no different in this case. When there's one market maybe slumping, hopefully you have an export market that might be thriving, and that kind of keeps your overall numbers steady or growing, as opposed to if you're exclusively a US business, if there's a slump in the US market or a recession, you're going to feel that more heavily. So that's my advice.
That is fantastic advice. That is, I mean, so well said. And that's the number one reason why I say people should export, because of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so now on your website, you don't have any translation.
No. So like I said, we're in our infancy. We're not selling outside of the US on our website yet.
Mm-hmm. But that's part of the e-commerce plan that
Correct.
You're working on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. And then what about the packaging in like the Asian countries?
So I know it's a fantastic question. I know that our Japanese distributor puts basically a sticker over the entire back of our packaging. So they cover all of our copy and artwork, and they basically replicate the artwork, and it's all Japanese. And I found in traveling in Japan, many people do not speak English. So in fact, when I go there, our distributor has somebody that can travel around with me and translate.
Mm-hmm. Or interpret, because interpret is spoken and translation is written. People outside the industry don't know that much, but yes, so that really helps when you're building relationships there.
For sure.
Yeah, and so when you're in Taiwan, it's all in English too?
Taiwan's a little more split, but definitely need interpretation as well.
Oh no, I meant on your packaging.
Oh, I'm sorry. We keep that in English. Surprisingly, and now that you've put me on the spot, I don't have a definitive answer as to why we do that. You're going to have me up all night trying to figure this one out.
Well, this is about the point where I'm pulling my hair out going, oh my gosh, you can increase those revenues by doing translation and some slight packaging changes. You can increase your revenues by so much, but yeah, you also have to make a plan and then do the investment, but the opportunity is there.
Let's just add a little more work to the plate.
I've got lots of ways to simplify that for you. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's so fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about you. I mean, this is so fascinating. You grew up in New York. Tell me about that and how you got to be such an outdoors person and working in the best sock factory there is.
Oh boy, it's how I became an outdoor person. I don't know because I don't even know that's in my DNA. I remember, a New York City apartment saying I wanted to go camping, and my dad always thought it was crazy. He's like, "Why would you want to do that? You've got a place right here. Like, go for a walk in Central Park." And so, yeah, I don't know where it came from, but I do remember um, when I felt I needed to leave New York, and I was after visiting Vermont several times, and but I remember trying to get off the subway one day, and everybody was crowding on, and I I couldn't get off, and I remember that's it. Like I need to get out of this place. I need less people around me.
And how old were you at this point?
I was maybe about 25 or so.
Okay, so through
Was
college back in New York and just going, I'm done.
Yeah, so all honesty, my undergrad degree was in Italian language and culture. So I studied Italian. I know all about Dante Alighieri and all that literature. And business was a minor. And I went back later and took master's in business classes. But I was basically right out of school, just working wherever I could, but with no clear direction.
Hmm.
I I don't I don't know that I haven't grown up yet. It's been about 15 years in Vermont, and I still don't have a clear direction, but I really do love what I'm doing right now, and I plan to be here for a while.
Yeah, no clear direction as you've had multiple promotions at Darn Tough and you're doing your international business that is steadily growing. So I hate to tell
I
you, I think you've grown up.
well, I'm very grateful and fortunate. So I definitely acknowledge that.
Yeah. So you told us one great, memorable cross-cultural experience. Um, do you have others to share? Another one?
Oh, let's see. It's well, we might see a trend here. Is similar in Scandinavian countries. The cheers. You don't go clanking glasses all together. It's a very kind of silent. Pick up your glass. You're supposed to be only holding it with a certain amount of fingers, and you just kind of look at people across the table and nod. And after you've done that, you take a small sip, and then you kind of do a nod around the table all over again. Whereas, I just go in there and I'm ready to clank glasses like it's Oktoberfest or something like that. So
Oh, that's so funny. Right. And the eye contact's really important, right?
it
When you're
is.
looking at everybody.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. For sure.
Yeah.
And then just trying to kind of fumble my way through Germany. I'm sure I've gotten cursed at. I just don't know it. Um, I learn a lot as I go.
Right, right, right. And I think one of the thing that's come up over all the episodes is that you stay curious and you know that you're going to make mistakes, like you said at the beginning, but it's developing that trust.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. As part of like setting, I had mentioned like setting expectations internally, externally. One of those expectations, probably the first one, should be that you should expect change, because the best laid plans don't always pan out the way you have intended.
Right. So there does take some flexibility. Well, it takes
Absolutely.
a lot of flexibility
A
in dealing
lot.
across language, culture, and international business. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah,
but
for
if you
sure.
just expect change, then that takes you far away.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
do put that at the top of my list. This may change.
Just may change. How about your favorite vacation?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I really I love Scotland. I think it's a beautiful part of the world. Uh, I love Norway. Uh, obviously, I love Italy. I'm Italian. I carry actually a dual passport. So, but I have not had success in selling socks to Italy. And
No.
I will tell you, this is like if I'm here till retirement, I have to sell socks into Italy. But Italians
So
are,
who would be a good introduction for you, or what would help you sell socks into Italy? Let's put it out there because we're listened to in over 40 countries. So there could be somebody
yeah,
from Italy listening.
hear me out.
Yes, yes.
You need a darn tough sock. It's so our knitting machines are all beautiful Italian knitting machines, and so that really translates to Italians make beautiful socks as well. And Italians are very loyal to products from their own country, and I think that's where my hang up is right now.
So are you looking for a distributor? Are you looking for consumer buyers, or?
Yes, to both. I mean, obviously, for a distributor to be successful, we would need consumer buyers on the other side. So it's a tough one. And I mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of great outdoor shoe brands that come out of Northern Italy. We've talked to all of them, trying to establish a partnership or some sort of shared sales team, and it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Okay. Well, it will work. It hasn't
It
worked yet.
Yes, Wendy, correct.
All right. Well, I'm connected to some owners over in Italy, so I'll try to put a word out for you.
Perfetto.
Perfetto. Great. And your favorite foreign word? I've got to ask that.
Oh, I got to say, I'm a little rusty from not traveling and not being out there. And it's on one hand, unfortunately, like all our business is done in English. And like, if we have a sales meeting with our teams from Sweden and Norway and Germany and
Mhm.
and Netherlands and Austria, everybody's going to speak English because they all don't know each other's languages. So that I'd have to get back to you on that.
No,
Like I
no,
said,
no, no, no. You know Italian. What's your favorite Italian word, or your favorite?
well, okay. Italian is there's a word. The word marvelous is meraviglioso, and it just sounds. I don't know. I love the way it flows. And actually, I guess it's starting to bring back all these. There's a kid's book, The Hungry Caterpillar, and I
Yeah.
remember, and I got that for my daughter in Italian, and the piccolo bruco mai sazio, the hungry caterpillar, turns into a meraviglioso farfalla, and it's a beautiful butterfly, and those are just. I love the Italian language. It's very sing-song, and unfortunately, I probably have a bit of an American accent on it, but it is Italian, Spanish. They're beautiful languages.
Oh my gosh. Well, that is a fantastic word. And I knew once we get it triggered, and then it's got this wonderful memory with your daughter with the hungry caterpillar. So,
Yeah.
yes, I knew you had a good one in you. And how about any final advice for anybody who's taking a product international?
Have fun. It's this. If you're not having fun, then you're not doing it right, and it is going to take hard work. You're going to be up at all sorts of hours if you really want to meet your customer where they're at. But it is about having a lot of fun, and it is a very rewarding process when it works out. And hopefully, if you're lucky, you get to go and travel and visit some amazing cultures in the process, which is, like I said, that's my favorite part of all of this. It's just getting to know people and their families and traditions, because that's what makes the world go round, right? That's the beautiful part of the world, the differences that we have.
Oh my gosh, you really said that so well.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so where can people, yeah, and we'll end on this. Where can people find Darn Tough socks if they're interested in getting some now?
So we're in over about 2,500 retailers in the U.S. So there is a store finder, and we definitely love all of our B2B support out there. That's where this business got its legs, was with the support of retailers, local retailers. So go into your local outdoor store, and hopefully you'll find Darn Tough on the wall. If you go to darntough.com, like I said, there is a store finder link, so you can find locally who has it. And so that's definitely where, and that actually, we have, I think all but a couple of our international retailers are on that store finder as well. So if you're listening to this, in Norway or the UK or Japan, you'll find a local retailer on our store finder there too.
Oh, fantastic. All right. And Joe, where can people find you?
I guess LinkedIn is a great spot for that. It's just Joe Nocito, international sock guy at Darn Tough Vermont.
Okay. And Nocito is Nocito.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here today. This was, we really did a deep dive on a lot of questions because you brought a lot of stuff up. And so listeners, I hope you learned something from it. If you know somebody that has a consumer product, this is probably a good episode to share with them. So go ahead and do that. And remember to give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed it. So thanks so much. And we'll be back with you next time. That's a wrap for this session. A big thanks to you for listening to the Global Marketing Show. Hope you had just as much fun as I did. New sessions launch weekly on all places you find podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and of course on our website. If you know someone interested in this topic, please tell them about us. Au revoir for now.